The entire purpose of an operational plan is to discuss the tactics that we're going to use that mitigate the most risk. I don't think any teams of guys are sitting around and they're going, you know what? I think this tactic increases the amount of unnecessary risk we have to take on and therefore increases the likelihood that one of us gets seriously hurt or killed or a civilian gets seriously hurt or killed. So let's utilize this tactic. Okay, so that's not happening. I don't believe that's happening. We're coming up with an operational plan because we want to mitigate risk. On the back end, after the operation takes place, we are having a debrief or an after action or a critique where we discuss things that went well, maybe some things that didn't go so well, and we make adjustments in the future so that we can be better. I don't believe in the excuse that you see online from people when things go bad is you can't mitigate all risk or CQB is dangerous. That's just something that people on the internet say as an excuse because it's easy to say, but that's not what teams are doing. After an operation takes place, guys are getting around and they're just having a conversation about how they can improve on what took place so they can get better in the future. That's what's happening. I'm going to play some body cams in this video. I'm not going to play the raw footage. I'm just going to narrate over them for the sake of time. And we're going to discuss the tactics that I believe they're using and maybe some potential outcomes of the tactics that they chose to use in these situations. This video is a SWAT team assisting a law enforcement agency and the DEA on a narcotics warrant. They're entering through the driveway. They're making their way down the driveway to a backside residence. And once they get to the backside of the first house, they encounter some dogs. They make their way up the stairs. And right before they actually get to the door, the suspect opens the door with a firearm and the officer shoots that individual. That individual goes down and he dies. Now, from the moment that they hit the ground at the street to the moment they got to the door in the back, it was about 34 seconds. From the moment they encountered the dogs barking to the moment that they got to the top of the stairs, it was about 22 seconds. That's important because I'm utilizing that 22 seconds as the time in which the suspect probably realized something was happening and he decided to arm himself and then head to his front door. The dogs barking, meaning now the team is compromised. So they moved covertly, I would say, through the driveway where they could get to a certain point where the suspect didn't know that they were there. The dogs barking compromised them. 22 seconds from the bottom of the stairs to the door opening at the top. In the meantime, as the officers are making their way up the stairs, or that first officer is making his way up the stairs, the officers behind them are throwing bangers or diversionary devices. And to somebody who isn't expecting them or doesn't know what they are, what they sound like, they sound like gunshots. So you have this individual, and thankfully, if you want to say thankfully, it was actually the suspect, right? Imagine if this individual wasn't the suspect. He was just somebody else that was inside the residence. Now we're kind of talking about something a little bit more impactful, right? Or imagine if the suspect actually just shot the officer in this situation, and then the suspect dropped the gun and now he's in custody. Of course, they're going to charge him. But at what point did this person know that these were police? And the answer is he most likely never knew. Now, officers are always going to say they knew, right? That's just what happens. But in this case in particular, which I think is unique from most of these other cases, is right before the door opened, you hear someone start to verbalize police. Got it. Yep. Hey, let me see. Right? I'm not going to say whether this was a knock and announce or it was a no knock because we never really got to the knocking portion or the entry portion to figure out which one this was. I'm not going to get into the semantics or the rules behind when you have to knock or where you have to knock because you don't necessarily have to start announcing from outside the curtilage if you're entering to the property from a typical access point. Like you're not jumping a fence, you're not cutting a lock. You could technically move to the door and start announcing there. But, this is what people would consider speed, surprise, and violence of action. And, 34 seconds from the time their feet hit the ground at the street till they get to the top of the door, 22 seconds is really what it took the suspect to, arm himself and come to the door. And this is one of those situations where you could say, it worked out. But if this suspect shoots the officer here, now you just have a dead cop, for what reason, and a suspect who is likely, he'll probably get charged, but I find it highly unreasonable that he would get convicted, because at what point did he actually know that the police were there serving a warrant? And so I think it's a reasonable question to ask is, in this situation in particular, and many other instances out there, did we just create a more dangerous situation that we didn't otherwise have to create? This video, I went over the tactics in my previous video, but they pull up to serve a warrant for child sex crimes, and they're only announcing over the loudspeaker. And maybe it's 4 or 5 times they announce, police, and we're here to serve a warrant. It's 5 in the morning, right? And the officers are at the door, and they're just yelling, come to the door. They're not yelling police. They're just yelling, come to the door, come to the door.
Come outside! Open the door!
And at one point they breach, and you have people flowing out of this residence, and then you have a person emerging from, some bedroom, and he has a gun, and it's pointed at the ground. Now, I think it's reasonable to assume, and again, police are always going to take the perspective that he knew it was the police, that this individual at 5 in the morning, wherever he was sleeping, didn't quite understand exactly what was going on, and he was bringing a gun to investigate what the noise was. And I'd like to challenge you guys to ask yourself, if you are in your room sleeping at 5 in the morning, do you think that you're gonna hear a loudspeaker out in front of your house? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Do you think if you hear the speaker, you're gonna understand what it is they're saying? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But my bedroom in a 2,600 square foot house is at the back of my house. My pool is right here. It's by my back bedroom. My AC units are right outside my room, my window where I'm sleeping, and I'm sleeping. So at what point do you think I'm, 1, hearing it to begin with, and 2, understanding what it is they're saying if I am hearing it? And so this person who came to the door with a gun, it appears his posture is like, what's going on here? Let me investigate what's going on here. And this individual isn't even involved in the warrant. This is the suspect's brother, okay? So that obviously aggravates things a little bit. But my question is, if we're gonna knock and announce, because that's what this is, and there is no legal standard, to what you have to, and how much time you have to take, and to what extent you have to announce yourself. You just have to make your presence known who you are, state what your intent is, and that's pretty much it, right? But why wouldn't we be going all the way, right? Why wouldn't we be utilizing our lights and sirens to indicate that we're the police, keeping our police lights on? Police lights is a really good indicator out in front of a house that you are the police. Why aren't we also knocking at the door, then saying that we're the police if we're standing there? And this looks like a predominantly Hispanic, home. Why are we not also doing this in Spanish, right? These are layers to protect yourself, right, the officers, from liability, but also to give the people inside a legitimate notice, right? I can't answer that question. I don't know why that is. Our policy says that you will have a marked vehicle, you have lights, you will utilize your sirens, and you'll make your presence known. Here's the video that I am going to play in its entirety so you can hear it, and I want you guys to listen to the difference, right? So in the first video, it's just announcing 5 times over a loudspeaker, then banging, hey, come out, come out, come out. And then in this next video, which actually happens to be a SWAT team very closely related to the other SWAT team, and the difference in the 2 announcement procedures.
Miami Beach Police Search Warrant! Miami Beach Police Search Warrant! Miami Beach Police Policía! Venga afuera! Apartamento 13! Salga afuera! Keep giving the knock and announce. Keep giving the knock. Let me see your head! No te muevas, no te muevas. Let me see your head. Come on out. Police, come on out.
Hey, suavecito, sigue caminando. I need hands.
No te muevas.
Hands up, hands up.
No te muevas.
Sigue caminando. Hey, we're gonna need hands over here. Bring them,
Get him, Garza.
Ven, camina para atrás. Sigue caminando para así. Hey, positive about something.
So in that incident, which is also, I believe, a narcotics warrant, you have the police lights, the police sirens, you have police officers at the door yelling that they're the police, and you actually have a drone like right outside the door with police lights, which is just, extra. And you also have them verbalizing their commands in both English and Spanish. These are all layers that are meant to protect you and to prevent people from inside the house from mistaking the fact that you are the police and that you're actually there to serve a legal purpose. Here's an incident that's only a few months old, or last year in the summertime, and this happens all the time. I've actually seen this happen with my own eyes. So officials said that the suspects allegedly stated that they were there to serve a warrant and were seen wearing bulletproof vests, ski masks, and badges on their necks. At one point, they tried to force their way in, opened fire through the front door, causing the homeowner to shoot back. The homeowner shot back and killed 2 individuals for a home invasion. The homeowner spoke to the police and said they thought it was unusual that they didn't hear sirens or see police cars once the suspects showed up. So these things are happening. Bad guys are pretending to be the police. They want the people inside to believe that they are the police. So they're knocking on the door. Maybe they look the part. They're trying to act the part. And they're there to serve a warrant, whatever the case is. But what are they not doing? They're not utilizing a police car, police sirens, or police lights, because they only want the people inside the residence to believe they're police. They don't want to draw extra attention to themselves while they're conducting a criminal act. That seems pretty obvious. It's almost as if, and you guys can learn these things from other events that happen. And to law enforcement's credit, we do learn a lot from incidents that happen outside of a particular agency. But it always, fascinates me when it's almost like some agencies are not learning. Are we just waiting for the next Breonna Taylor to happen, right? Now, I'm not going to get into whether they actually knocked on the Breonna Taylor, whether they didn't. They say they did, they say they didn't. But one thing is certain. The suspect inside the Breonna Taylor's apartment didn't realize that they were the police, whether they were knocking and announcing or they weren't. And that's evident because you have a person shooting one time at the police, and then he doesn't have a criminal history, he's never been arrested, and there's nothing illegal in the house. Why would that person of that profile decide to take a shot at the police? And obviously he wasn't convicted, even though he was charged with shooting at the police. So this is what the officer who was shot in the Breonna Taylor incident said, one mistake they made or what they should have done instead of what they actually did.
We used to always have a marked car come out front, and as we're going up to hit the door, they'd hit their lights and sirens and sit there with their lights on to let the neighborhood know, if nothing else, what's going on. I don't know if it was because of manpower shortages, we couldn't get bodies to come out. At some point, and I can't even tell you when, we quit doing it.
Now, many of you, I'm sure, will disagree with my takes on these body cams, and that's perfectly fine. But I think that when you rush to the front door of an objective and you have to deploy diversionary devices to distract dogs, and those diversionary devices probably sound like gunshots to the person who doesn't know the police are coming after him. And then, it takes you 34 seconds to go from point A to point B. It takes you 22 seconds to get from the compromise to the front door. And the suspect is meeting you at the door, pointing a gun at you and opening the door for you. I think that and having to shoot that person, and thankfully in this case it was the suspect, but I think that's a bad thing for law enforcement. I think that's a bad look for law enforcement. I think it's much, much worse if that guy, that suspect, shoots the officer dies, and the suspect gives up, and they charge him, of course, because that's what they're going to do, and the suspect, eventually, probably doesn't serve any time at all, and those get dismissed because he never knew it was the police. I think that is all bad. I think that if we're serving a search warrant at a location and we're only utilizing our PA system and then we're banging on the door to come out, but nobody's saying police, no police lights, no police sirens at 5 a.m, and then you have an individual coming to the door with a gun pointed at the ground, and it looks like he's probably trying to figure out what's going on because he doesn't realize it's the police, and you have to shoot that person. I think that's bad for law enforcement. I think that the right thing to do is to objectively look at these incidents and ask yourselves, is there other ways that we could have handled these problems? Is there other ways that we could have solved these problems? If you talk to the guys, a lot of guys doing narcotics things, and if they're worried about the destruction of evidence in a house, they're taking away the suspect or taking down the suspect when he leaves the house, stopping him on a traffic stop, doing a felony stop, however, open air takedown, however you want to do that. Okay, well now we shouldn't be worried necessarily, right, about the destruction of evidence, right? In that case too, also there was 2 small children, I think they said infant children, inside that residence, that house that the suspect was shot in. So those are all things that they should have known through the operational plan. Sometimes it gets missed, but The reason that they're probably inside of that residence to begin with is because there was a CI that went in there, was buying narcotics. So he's in there, he's looking around, okay, is there any toys? Do you see any kids? Is there any dogs? These are things that they probably knew ahead of time. And so, you know, I think it's a reasonable question to ask yourself, is there other ways to go about solving this problem? Or at least, is it worth the risk? Whether it's a risk to your safety, the safety of other people, or a liability risk, right? In the situation where the child sex crimes warrant, that suspect worked for TSA. So, I mean, I don't know if they were going to detain him to talk to him because there wasn't an arrest warrant, it was just a search warrant. But if that was the case and you're worried about the destruction of evidence, hey, he's at work. Okay, let's go run the warrant. Now, in that case, are you really worried about the destruction of evidence? Probably not. And if you were just going to stop him to talk to him and ask him if you want to come in for questioning, that can be done while he's at work. Hey, we're here. Have him come into the back office and let's talk to him. However you guys want to handle that, right? So there's a number of different ways that you can handle problems. And I think the wrong thing to do is to say, well, it's just a dangerous job, you know. That is not necessarily the purpose. The purpose is to identify the tactic that is going to mitigate the most risk and afford you the opportunity to not take on exceptionally high levels of unnecessary risk.